Have you noticed how rarely the world asks for your permission anymore? Your attention is taken before you offer it. Your emotions are pulled before you choose them. Your thoughts are interrupted before they finish forming. News alerts, opinions, expectations, urgency disguised as importance. It often feels as though life is no longer something you are living from within, but something constantly happening to you from the outside. And yet, more than 1800 years ago, a man who ruled the most powerful empire on earth lived under a pressure few of us could even imagine. His world was not shaped by algorithms or screens, but by war, plague, political betrayal, and responsibility on a scale that touched millions of lives. His name was Marcus Aurelius. And in the middle of that relentless noise, he turned inward, not to escape reality, but to understand how a human being could remain whole while standing inside it. Marcus Aurelius was not searching for peace in isolation. He was an emperor, a general, a judge, a husband, a father. His days were filled with petitions, military campaigns, legal disputes, and constant demands from others. And yet, at night, often exhausted, he would write quietly to himself. Not speeches, not teachings for the public, just reminders. Gentle, sometimes stern notes meant to realign his own mind. What we now call meditations was never meant to be read by anyone else. It was a private conversation between awareness and itself. What makes this extraordinary is not the philosophy itself, but the context. Marcus was not writing from comfort. He was writing from the center of chaos. And what he kept returning to, again and again, was a single question that feels deeply relevant today. How does a person remain internally stable when the external world refuses to slow down? His answer was something he never named explicitly, but scholars later described as the Inner Citadel. A place within the human mind that cannot be invaded unless we allow it to be. Not a wall built of denial. Not emotional numbness. Not detachment from life. But a stable center of perception where events are received without immediately becoming commands. Marcus believed that every human being possesses this inner stronghold. A place where perception happens before judgment, where awareness remains intact even as circumstances change. He wrote one of his most famous lines to remind himself of this truth. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But this sentence is often misunderstood. Marcus was not advocating rigid self-control or emotional suppression. He was pointing to something far more subtle. He was pointing to the difference between what happens and how it appears inside consciousness. That difference, for Marcus, was everything. Think about how often your inner state shifts because of something external. A message. A comment. A headline. A memory triggered without warning. Notice how quickly tension arises, how judgment forms, how emotion tightens. Before you realize it, you are no longer present. You are reacting. Marcus understood that the greatest threat to human freedom is not force or oppression, but unexamined reaction. When perception collapses directly into judgment, the inner citadel is breached without resistance. One of Marcus Aurelius' most radical practices was deceptively simple. He trained himself to pause between perception and interpretation. to see what was happening before adding a story to it. He would remind himself that an event is just an event, and that suffering often comes not from what happens, but from what the mind immediately adds. "This thing is not unbearable," he would write. "It is only my judgment that makes it so." This was not denial. It was clarity. And modern neuroscience now mirrors this insight. When the brain believes it already understands a situation, it shuts down curiosity. When awareness remains open, new responses become possible. The inner citadel is not about avoiding emotion. Marcus felt anger, grief, exhaustion, doubt. His writings are filled with moments of vulnerability. What he practiced was not emotional repression, but emotional observation. He noticed feelings arise without allowing them to define his identity. He understood that thoughts appear in the mind, but they are not the mind itself. This insight aligns closely with contemplative traditions across cultures, from Buddhism to Taoism, which emphasize awareness as the ground from which experience arises. Importantly, Marcus Aurelius did not withdraw from responsibility. He did not step away from leadership or action. The inner citadel was not a place of retreat, but a place of return. A way to engage with the world without being consumed by it. In modern terms, we might say it is the difference between responding and reacting, between presence and compulsion. It allows action to arise from steadiness rather than fear. Here lies one of the great paradoxes Marcus understood deeply. The more we try to control everything around us, the more fragile we become. But when we release control over what is not ours, something else stabilizes. Our center. Marcus repeatedly reminded himself that other people's actions are not his. Other people's opinions are not his. The future is not his. What belongs to him is how he meets each moment. His attention. His interpretation. His presence. This is where the inner citadel lives. In 2025, many people feel exhausted not because life is objectively harder than before, but because attention is constantly fragmented. We are pulled in too many directions, evaluated too often, and rarely allowed to rest in awareness without stimulation. Marcus Aurelius would recognize this immediately. He would likely say that our fatigue is not caused by events themselves, but by the constant inner movement that never pauses to observe itself. The inner citadel is not about doing less. It is about being less pulled. It is about noticing when the mind has been carried away and gently returning to center. Marcus did not offer grand rituals or complex techniques. His practices were subtle, almost invisible. One simple experiment he might invite us to try is this. The next time something disrupts you, irritation, fear, urgency, pause for just a moment. Not to suppress the feeling or analyze it. Simply notice that something is happening in your mind. That noticing itself is the inner citadel. It is the moment awareness remembers itself. Marcus also reflected deeply on impermanence. Not as a source of despair, but as a grounding truth. Soon you will have forgotten everything, he wrote. Soon everything will have forgotten you. This was not nihilism. It was liberation. When identity loosens its grip on permanence, presence becomes lighter. And when presence becomes lighter, life flows more easily. Marcus understood that much of human anxiety comes from trying to make temporary things permanent. Status, reputation, comfort, approval. The inner citadel remains stable because it does not depend on these things. There is something profoundly modern about Marcus Aurelius' wisdom. In a world obsessed with productivity, visibility, and constant self-optimization, he reminds us that inner stability does not come from doing more, but from seeing more clearly. From understanding the nature of perception itself. From realizing that while the world will continue to move, change, and demand, there is a part of you that does not need to follow every motion. Marcus Aurelius did not build monuments to himself. He built reminders. And perhaps the most important one is this: you do not need to escape the world to be at peace. You only need to stop outsourcing your center to forces that do not belong to you. The inner citadel is not somewhere you go. It is something you remember. It is already here. Quiet. Steady. Watching. And whenever you return to it, the world may still be loud, unpredictable, and demanding. But you are no longer lost within it. So as you step back into your life today, notice where your attention rests. Notice what tries to pull you. And gently, without force, see if you can return to that unmoving place inside that has never been threatened. If something in this episode stayed with you, even quietly, let it settle. There is no need to rush to conclusions or answers. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, understanding unfolds in its own time. This has been What We Are, a space where we explore the mysteries of the mind, consciousness, and the nature of reality. Thank you for being here. Until we meet again, remember that the world will continue to move, to demand, to distract. But the inner citadel remains steady, available, waiting.